Welcome to Bamfordrose and another question of the week. In this week's question of the week, it's what V12 Vantage should I get for my 80-odd thousand pounds? So if you are new to Astons, looking at this situation from the outside, it all might appear a bit strange. That's because in the white corner, we've got a V12 Vantage S, which is 7-speed sport shift, 565 horsepower out of the most evolved V12 naturally aspirated engine. Over in the blue corner, we've got 6-speed manual. Now this was from much earlier, 09 to about 13. We've got a 510 bhp motor with 6-speed manual, both going for about the same amount of money. And over in the corner that will give no colour because the car isn't there anyway is the Merc Vantage, which we don't look after, but if we did, then here's an example of one for sale. Again, £80,000. Now there's a glut of these Merc Vantages on the market and we're not going to touch on that one in this episode because these are the two hot seats. So let's go for a drive in each one and figure out which one is best for you. So now we're in a 2014 V12 Vantage S. So this has got 7-speed paddle shift. It's got twin plate clutch as standard. Now that means that with the evolved software that this 7-speed has got, pull away, shifting, everything to do with this gearbox is absolutely sorted, and there's very minor criticisms of how the system works. Now previous criticisms of the sport shift system comes from the 4.3 V8, and that's evolved in the 4.7 and then the Vantage S sport shift, and it's got better along the years. The 4.7 Vantage S sport shift doesn't suffer with the same problems and criticisms as the 4.3, and it's been evolved even more so in this V12 Vantage S. As I say, very few criticisms you could give this gearbox. It's got a 565 bhp motor. Now this car, the same as the blue one, has got our manifolds and catalysts on, so this is a good comparison between the two because this one is a shade over 600 horsepower, and as I said earlier, the blue V12 Vantage 6-speed manual is a shade under 600 horsepower. Now as soon as you sit in this car, it just feels a lot newer than the 6-speed manual. Now, 6-speed manual versions were out from about 08, 09 through to about 13, and then 13, 14 is where the V12 Vantage S started. You get the touch sensitive dashboard, so it is actually the technology and the features that makes the car feel a bit newer rather than the car being newer itself. And as soon as you start the engine up and just trundle along, it all feels much more refined than the 6-speed manual. This is because over the years the factory has evolved that hidden art of noise, vibration and harshness engineering, and suspension bushing, suspension itself, engine mounting, isolation, absolutely everything to give the driver more comfort is just evolved in this car, and you can feel it. As I say, if you just trundle in a car park at 5 miles an hour, the car just feels much more smoother. That's important because it does give you an added feel of newness and luxury, but doesn't detract and take away the values that we do like, which is an analog feel. And just on the interior, personally, I do prefer these comfort seats as opposed to the lightweight sport seats. You know, I prefer the heated elements to them and all of the electrical adjustments, and they're actually pretty comfortable. And if you're going to do predominantly GT cruising, then these are the better seats than the lightweight sport seats. So depending on the car and the mileage, the age in the marketplace, then obviously prices vary. But here's an example of the car up at £89,750. Let's go and check out what just over 600 horsepower with sport shift feels like. That exhaust note is just awesome. But that's the Bamfordrose manifolds and high flow cats that's giving that pep up to the sound that a standard car doesn't have. Now, I hope you heard that through the camera. That speed matched blip downshift is what the 7-speed's all about. The driving pleasure that you get from that and blipping up and down the gearbox when you're at full throttle pedal, for me, gives me just as much driving pleasure as an actual manual car. It's also the added benefit that you get of a sport shift, where if you wanted to, you just pulled up at a town halfway through your GT cruise, you're trying to look for your hotel, traffic is annoying, you can just pop it in D and drive it as an auto. With all the ingredients of the sport shift gearbox being really electric on shifting up and down and throttle blipping, that versatility makes the sport shift a winner when you can just pop it in D for the moments that you just need to concentrate on something else rather than changing gear. Now on to driving dynamics. The V12 Vantage S has got ADS, adaptive damping system. So this is permanently adjusting each corner depending on the movements that you put through the chassis, and that's when it's in normal adaptive mode, or you can press it to have the button permanently in stiff mode if you're going for it on track. Obviously the blue one has just got its fixed rate dampers, and even when you're cruising, just that composure in the cabin is so much more refined with this adaptive damping system than it is on the manual fixed rate damping system. As with any UK road, there was some bumps in that stretch, but this adaptive damping system completely soaked all of them up, didn't translate those bumps into the cabin, and the car handled really well through the twisty sections at the same time. You just don't get that in the older fixed rate damper. It's a little bit too stiff. You feel all the bumps of the road, and it can bounce around on the road at the same time as giving you that stiff ride. So not just on its gearbox, on the suspension, this car wins easily. At 600 horsepower or thereabouts, then both cars are phenomenally powerful and phenomenally quick. It's really difficult with this 7-speed gearbox to figure out which one has got the edge. So we're just going to conduct a little scientific test, and obviously up to 60 miles an hour only, figure out which one is the quickest. Okay, so I just passed my little marker, which I obviously reached at 60, and when we repeat the test in the other car, we'll see which one's the winner. A standard V12 VS is a really quick and competent car. You don't have to upgrade it to be wowed by it, but at over 600 horsepower, this has definitely got a wow factor. In terms of cars that we modify, this is in my sort of top two. It's either going to be a V12 VS with a full kit on or a V8 AMR. That car is just awesome and has got a mix of ingredients that just makes you want to keep driving and driving that car. It's exactly the same with this V12 Vantage S. To get the wow factor though, you've got to get the Bamfordrose upgrade. If you get the factory upgrade, you pay a heck of a lot of money, you've still got your primary cats in place, and it's never going to be the performance that our upgrade kit gives you. So before we talk about the specs of this car, let's just talk about values. Now, if you've watched any of my videos over the last few years, I've always been disappointed and commented that V12 Vantage values didn't appear to have that bubble effect that DBS did for some reason. You know, DBS, especially DBS manual prices, just went crazy for a while and ballooned all the way up there to, you know, people trying to get 115, 120k for a DBS manual. Obviously, DBS manual final carbon editions are super special cars and go for much more money than that, but that's a different proposition. But a template DBS compared to a template V12 Vantage, DBS was going up in value where V12 Vantage for a while was languishing. Now, happily over the last couple of years that seems to have corrected itself, and V12 Vantage manual values are appreciating. So maybe if you saw one privately for sale, sort of lowest you're going to see one is late 60s. And if it was in the trade, especially with a timeless warranty, then they're certainly starting with 70, if not 80, which is exactly the value of the one I show for sale here, £80,000. Now this one has got the lightweight sport seats and you can sit in them. And if your frame fits within this wing back area, you can really get quite snug in them, and they're very, very comfortable. How comfortable they'd be on a long GT cruise, I'm not too sure. Hence why overall I do prefer the standard seats. And you get the electronic adjustment and you get your heated seat features in them as well. So this engine is 510 brake horsepower. Now this has been modified with R manifolds and catalysts, and it's a shade under 600 horsepower, which is going to be a good comparison with the V12 Vantage S because that has also got R kit on, and it's a shade over 600 horsepower in that car. This has got the manual 6-speed gearbox. So really, do prefer analog cars and do prefer the feel and experience that you get out of them. Now, a while ago I might have said that I don't like the touch sensitive dashboard, but I think the look of that later V12 VS touch sensitive dashboard is really, really nice. Although this car has got a great analog feel to it, the touch and feel of this dashboard is starting to show its age a bit. So let's take this for a drive and see what we get for our £80,000. Now you can instantly feel that this car rides a bit harsher on its suspension, and it's got fixed rate dampers which are quite stiff compared to the electronic adaptive solution that the V12 Vantage S has got. That becomes important if you're doing GT cruising, because the level of refinement and composure that the Vantage S has in its cabin would become really noticeable on long journeys, and you get pretty tired of this cabin pretty quickly. But this car's all about its manual gearbox experience, so let's take it through the gears. Now if you're going for it, you really miss that throttle blip, downshift, speed match gear change that the V12 Vantage S gives you. But as you can feel, you know, we've got dry roads and we've got Pirelli P0s on. With the modification that this has got, punching out 600 horsepower, this makes this car lose traction in the dry. You definitely don't get that analog raw feeling from the V12 Vantage S that you get in this car. Now I drive so many of these cars, V8 Vantage, DB9, so I span many gearboxes, paddle shift, autos, manuals, and when I'm going for it in situations like that, I instinctively with my left hand try and grab a paddle and downshift when the engine revs are getting a bit low, or I'm braking and I need to put it in a lower gear. I don't know if that's telling me that the natural instinct in me, if when we're going for it, is I want paddles rather than actually going for a gear lever, but it's quite curious. So we're just about to run our little speed test, obviously up to the national speed limit, and I'll tell you which one was the winner. Oh, ho, ho, ho. Would you believe it? It's the 6-speed manual. It certainly feels like it should have won because you get wheel spin and you get a better sense of acceleration. But is that because this car is more analog than the V12 VS, and the V12 VS is a bit more isolated, a bit more refined, and therefore it's shielding from you the actual true speed that the car is doing? So when you're on it and you're driving the V12 Vantage manual spiritedly, you know, you've got to concentrate on gear shifting, and the workload is quite high, it's quite intense. If you're just cruising along, then obviously it's no problem at all. But if you've got some corners to negotiate, if you're breaking down a bit and you want to keep yourself in the power range, then you are going to have to downshift in the manual, and you're probably going to have to heel and toe and throttle blip to give yourself a smooth transition and the best performance through the corner. The V12 VS just does that effortlessly. You can paddle up, paddle down, it will throttle blip. The sound of the engine rev during that throttle blip is glorious, and that is reducing the workload. You're having fun, and each individual is going to have to decide for themselves. Do you prefer the purity of the manual and you do all that workload yourself, or do you pull a few paddles and hear the electronics doing it all for you and take great enjoyment out of that? So it's the price point which makes this decision relevant, because there is a very strange situation going on right now. So you've had V12 Vantage manual from 09 up to 13, which has languished a little bit in price on previous years, but now it's basically appreciating. That means, like the three examples I show here, you've got a very good example low mileage car up at 80,000. You've now got the 2013-14 V12 Vantage S that is basically on its depreciating curve. I'd say it's probably bottomed out, and it's probably going to start going up again pretty quick, because cars like that you just can't buy anymore. Okay, it's a sport shift and it's not a manual, but it's still a 6 litre naturally aspirated, and the days of those engines being available to buy brand new have gone. And 80 odd thousand pounds gets you a very nice example car of the V12 Vantage sport shift variety. And this is where, if you didn't know the Aston world and didn't know the differences between the car, if you weren't a petrol head, you'd look at the new Vantage, and from the outside you'd think, what the heck is going on? There's this 2017 Merc Vantage which is depreciating like an absolute boulder down the side of a mountain face, now going for 70s, 80s. You've got a 12-year-old V12 Vantage 6-speed manual going for the same money, and you've got a paddle shift 8-year-old car going for the same money. A very coarse piece of analysis would say that the market doesn't like the new Merc Vantage, and the price is depreciating because of that. The market must like the purist manual, because you definitely cannot buy a 6-litre manual derivative anymore, and hence the 12-year-old car price is appreciating. And we're just at a funny point in the depreciation appreciation curve of the V12 Vantage S, where at this moment in time it can be bought for pretty much the same money as a good 6-speed manual. So it does really depend on personal preference as to which one you pick as the winner. If you add all of those ingredients up, there's some positives, there's some negatives about both cars. For me, the V12 Vantage S with its 7-speed gearbox with the Bamfordrose plus 600 horsepower mod is the clear winner. That car is an absolute beauty to drive, very refined. If you didn't want the sport shift mode, you pop it into auto. You've got your adaptive damping, and it's a newer car. For me, the V12 Vantage S is the clear winner. But this manual spun the wheels up in 2nd and 3rd gear as I was just accelerating on a dry surface. You've got to have your wits about you to drive that if you're absolutely pressing on, and you couldn't ever get that sort of behaviour from the V12 Vantage S. And now we'd be into crystal ball territory about prices in the future. Will the 6-speed manual 6-litre naturally aspirated engine be treated as the holy grail, and prices will appreciate well past a V12 Vantage S? Will V12 Vantage S prices themselves start to appreciate? But I think one thing is for certain, that Merc V8 Vantage will carry on depreciating. And after that summary, I hope you're well and truly confused, and you know exactly what to do with your £80,000 to get you in the seat of whichever V12 Vantage Aston you choose. Hope you enjoyed that question of the week, and come back next week for another. In between then, please head over to our sister channel Petrol Revolt and check out the great content that we've got over on that channel. Subscribe to that channel, why not head across and subscribe on the website to get your black registration plate sticker. Until next week, we'll see you then.